Earlier this year began the airing of Sakamoto Days, an anime adaptation of a Shonen Jump battle manga of the same name. An event rivaled in its rarity only by the sun rising from the east and manga readers complaining about an anime before it's even out. And while I have no love for the kinds of people that will criticize an adaptation purely for failing to match the version of it they have in their heads, I couldn't help but sympathize a little bit this time around. Not because I thought it looked bad, nor because the source material was some masterpiece that deserved the Demon Slayer treatment, but rather because without the kind of animation that threatens to disable the critical thinking of even the most seasoned killjoy, I did not see the point of animating Sakamoto Days at all. Not from a practical standpoint, obviously. The point of animating it is to advertise the source material. But as the well from which numerous artists, writers, musicians, sound engineers, and the like must draw from to create a full season of animation, Sakamoto Days does not offer a ton to work with. The characters are kinda basic, the overarching story starts decent but begins to drag pretty quickly, it's just overall not great. So like most shonen battle anime, right? What's the big deal then? Why is this a video? Because while Yuto Suzuki is not, by my standards, a particularly great writer, when it comes to action, I consider him to be, without exaggeration, one of the greatest living draftsmen in the medium of sequential art. And to elaborate on that, I'm actually going to draw on a different series, one you are likely aware of in some capacity whether you like it or not. Solo Leveling is not very good. Not without merit, necessarily. There's something to be admired about a series so dedicated to and unashamed of its own power fantasy that the main character goes out of his way multiple times throughout the series to make sure he is the only one that can accomplish literally anything of consequence. And despite its many shortcomings, no one can ever accuse it of not knowing exactly what it is. That being an excuse for its late-grade artist Dubu to give face and form to the term aura farming almost half a decade before it entered the lexicon and people started memeing that fucking Vibra-slap. It is a power fantasy so juvenile it wraps all the way around to being almost respectable in its audacity. And the only reason it makes that round trip is because Dubu was built different, visualizing what could charitably be described as the story with some of the strongest designs and compositions in the webtoon format. Making it so that even when you read things like watching Sung Jin-woo's beasts fight the ants cured my 10-year battle with cancer, your response will most likely be to just laugh at it and move on, instead of holding your head in your hands for a few seconds before closing the tab. All of which really makes me wonder what anyone got out of reading the original web novel the manhwa was adapting, but I digress. Sakamoto Days, from its first couple of arcs, does not seem to have much in common with Sung Jin-woo's extended fan cam. The author seems to care about more than one character, and the initial premise of an elite assassin swearing off murder and running a convenience store for the sake of his wife and child holds some semblance of an emotional core. In contrast to Solo Leveling's, I must get stronger because I live in a den of cowards and vipers that can only be relied upon to respect overwhelming force. Hell, even the fights take themselves much less seriously than anything Sung Jin-woo and his shadow goons get involved with. The titular Sakamoto is a master of random bullshit dough, regularly dispatching hordes of mooks in fight scenes that blend Looney Tunes and peak Jackie Chan in a way I've never seen before. It's consistently entertaining and, much more impressively, actually funny. There's an amazing symbiosis where the comedy being primarily physical helps it overcome the usual language barrier that gag series tend to struggle with, and the action remains varied and interesting by incorporating slapstick in different ways for each fight. All of which is helped immensely by the fact that the creator, Yuto Suzuki, is one of the most outrageously talented action artists I have seen in comics, period. And there's plenty of reasons I could go into for that claim, some of which I will in a moment, others which are likely too far above my understanding of the art form for me to explain. But one of the biggest is how incredibly readable it is. And I know that sounds like complimenting a car for being the most four-wheeled vehicle I've ever seen, but that can be a really hard thing to nail in comics. Guiding the viewer's eye is a pretty vital skill in any kind of visual art, but it's especially important in comics, where the art has to take you from panel to panel in the exact right order for any given page to be coherent. And doing that while still being visually appealing and interesting is a hurdle even veterans and icons of the medium can struggle with. Like, I love One Piece, but some of these double-page spreads can be kind of overwhelming. So to make every single page near effortless to get through while also having some of the most creative and batshit fights I've seen in any medium outside a Platinum game is a triumph. I'm probably gonna cut back on the panel animations I usually do for these videos just so you can see them properly. It doesn't need my editing bullshit, it incorporates principles of animation better than some actual animations. Okay, yeah, that was the plan, but as you might have noticed from before this point, and will notice after, I kinda couldn't help myself, so, sorry about that. And they're not pulling the let's fight someplace empty card either. The environments are insanely varied and incorporated so thoroughly into each battle that they practically count as combatants. And to repeat a line from my last video, all of this is rendered with a spectacular clarity. No individual element is like obscenely complex, but the way everything is put together is a sight to behold. Much of which is courtesy of his assistant, so I'm actually going to give a little sidebar here. This is the only manga I can recall where the creator's supporting team is given the love it deserves. The end of many volume releases include not just art from his assistants, but sections where the individual artists get to talk about seeing their backgrounds they worked on and their own thought processes. It's really cool to see this kind of spotlight, and going off some of their comments, Suzuki Studio seems like an uncharacteristically good workplace in the manga industry. That's all, I just thought it was cool and didn't know where else to put it. Moving on. The characters are fun and likable, the world building of a comedic spin on the John Wick setting is pretty unique. It just came out the gate as an incredibly solid new battle series that could honestly have been something special if it just kept on that trajectory. But I wouldn't have made a second video on it if that's what it did. Pretty early on, you might begin to notice that the background characters are kind of off. Like their reactions to the unmitigated violence happening 10 feet away at any given time is really muted. Though given the comedy focus, it's not too hard to rationalize as just being part of the humor. But around that same time, elements of the more serious overarching plot start being introduced, alongside the thing where Sakamoto will go from fat to skinny as a sort of combat transformation. And to be clear, I hate this transformation. It takes a fun character design that adds to both the comedic and cool factor of the fights and fucking gentrifies it for all the most climactic encounters. That said, our first introduction to it is the best fight in the series up until that point, and the arc overall is still pretty great. But with a couple of years of hindsight, it becomes difficult not to see it as the first taste of everything I would come to resent about the series. As it progresses and the focus shifts more to the main plot, the overall tone becomes more serious to accommodate the higher stakes. But it does so in a weirdly inconsistent way. Goofier characters begin to be pushed into the background or changed to fit the tone, and explicit violent murder begins to feature much more heavily. But the world building remains farcically dumb. Worse than that is how they kept the bystanders exactly the same. Because, the reason death is tragic is that every single human being is a world unto themselves. An individual with hopes, dreams, flaws, loved ones, and the thought that all of that could just cease to exist in an instant is horrifying. These people are not human beings. They are androids with the self-preservation instinct of a turkey staring up at a rainstorm with its mouth open. And so when the main cast goes out of their way to keep them safe, or we flash back to Sakamoto's wife making him promise to leave the assassination life behind, the entire thing rings incredibly hollow. So what you're left with is a world comprised exclusively of superhuman homicidal freaks, regular homicidal freaks, and a population of lemmings. Even if the Sakamoto crew does stop the villain's plan to revive the assassination industry in the face of it being made obsolete by cancel culture, that's a real panel, the main plot's not very good either. The default state of this world is already a nightmare. Am I supposed to be rooting for them to live happily ever after in this GTA Online server? And a lot of this, bizarrely, seems to be on purpose. According to an interview with the series editor, dynamic fight scenes in interesting locations had priority over pretty much everything else. And, worrying that constant screaming civilians might make the tone darker than they intended, they made the executive decision to lobotomize every character without a name. Which was apparently also intended to make the reader more invested in the setting? He doesn't elaborate on that, so for my own sake, I'm just gonna try not to think about it. The series devolves into a bunch of loosely connected fight scenes that, for some reason, occasionally half-heartedly pretends to care about the sanctity of life again, and it's a fucking bummer. But I also wouldn't have made a second video on it if that's all it did. The progression of Sakamoto Days is not so much a deterioration of quality as it is a min-maxing of it. Because while every other aspect of the manga was left to languish, Yuto Suzuki and his studio of killers set themselves to the task of one-upping themselves in every fight scene. It is legitimately awe-inspiring how consistently creative and dynamic they make every fight. Many of the numerous new characters introduced will have maybe one character trait if they're lucky, but always come with an entirely distinct fighting style that introduces new dimensions to combat. The main characters' fighting styles, while on the slightly more generic side, thrive on creativity and adaptation. Combine that with the consistently varied and unconventional locations, and near every single fight manages to be the coolest shit I've ever seen in my life. You've got Osaragi cleaving a temple clean in half with a giant circular saw. You've got Heisuke engaging in the absolute sickest sniper duel in all of fiction. You've got Sakamoto and Drag schooling a bunch of punks while prepping cup ramen. You've got a cow doing a motorcycle slide at high speed to kick sparks off the road so she can light her cigarette. You've got literally everything involving Mr. Takamura, who is an old man in a suit with a katana that all these superhuman freaks treat like a fucking horror movie antagonist. It's not even an exaggeration, look at how they rendered this motherfucker. Look at the paneling work here. Who does this in a manga with characters named shit like Dump, Kill Baby, and Slur? And at some point it becomes clear that Sakamoto Days is not something that tried and failed to be a good shonen battle manga. This is something that told Solo Leveling to hold its beer. It's similarly concerned with cool set pieces and nothing else, but while it takes a moment to go all in on that and stop pretending it's got something to say, it executes on it so much better when it gets going, on variety alone. No shade to Dubu's art, but a big chunk of the back half of Solo is a lot of purple tinted RTS fuckery and like Unlimited Bladeworks that one time for some reason. And you'd best believe Suzuki and co take every opportunity to have these guys strike a hard pose. So you know what? Fuck it. If the writing had to shrivel up like a vestigial organ to allow for the scene where a guy says everything in the world is a gun as he shoots down a helicopter that lands on a bridge to create a wind tunnel that fires a car at female Magneto to defeat her, I can live with that. Who cares about an emotional chord? Who cares if every background character eats glue and gets Reddit cares messages every other day? Who cares if the story can't decide on whether or not assassins are supposed to be covert? Who cares if Sakamoto has been running Super Saiyan Ozempic almost all the time for the past couple arcs? Sure, Javier Rodriguez is taking you on a spirit quest through the pages of Absolute Martian Mindfucker, but did he draw a man using a crashed plane as a seesaw to launch a dude in the air before riding it like a ramp and smacking him with the landing gear? No? Then who fucking cares? All of that is tertiary. A skin to be shed so Yuto Suzuki could live his truth. A kindling for the fire that is the action. A sacrifice. Sacrifice all of it. Every character motivation, every quiet moment, every dull pain in the chest wondering what could have been. Sacrifice everything. Everything! On the altar of hype moments and aura. As always, thank you for watching and for your patience. The next video will be out in about a month. I'm saying that now just to help me get my own ass in gear because whatever qualms you may have with my upload schedule, trust me, I hate it so much fucking more. If you out there are somehow huffing the same copium I am, consider supporting me on Patreon for early access to videos, the ability to vote on video topics, and some other stuff. And see you in the next one.